countdown. We're going to get started in about 10 seconds here. Okay, I will call the May 19th Finance Committee meeting to order. Bill, do you have the roll?
Yeah, the roll is noted. We have the full committee here: Kathy Olson, Mark Sullivan, Dan Ramsey, and Luke Fazard.
Okay. First item is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the May 5th minutes?
So moved.
And
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is audit of the bills. Is there a motion for audit of the bills?
I do have an addition this evening, 2 invoices for Raymaker and Associates. Total amount is $2,500, and that's for services related to the city facility solar project coming from the Capital Projects Fund.
Okay. You said there were 2 invoices, or they're both from the same?
Both from the same. It's $1,250 for each of Lakeview Park and the EMS building for the structural assessment.
Got it. Okay. So is there any other discussion on the bills? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And that motion carries. Under bids and quotes, the proposal for environmental engineering hygienic services with TRC. Bill, do you have anything for this, or this is?
I do.
Coming. Okay.
Mark, I can speak to it.
Okay.
So it's in the council packet. I think, Bill, you are also put it in the finance packet as well.
Yeah, I'll bring that up here.
And Sam Polisco from TRC, I saw, is on the call. And so hopefully, Sam, you can, you're unmuted.
I should be
TRC,
on now, right?
Pardon me?
I think you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Very good.
TRC is a local and national environmental engineering firm. They approached me with the service that they provide that can provide a hygienic biological review done by their environmental engineering firm. And the concept that I've laid out in the council packet, in the finance packet, is that we would, after we have been open for at least a month, maybe longer, to limited by appointment with the public, that we would come in and have the buildings, and by buildings I mean City Hall, Senior Center, and the library, disinfected by an outside company. And TRC would follow along with them and test as they disinfect and provide immediate data to them about biological materials that may have not been captured through the disinfection. Sam, I'm going to ask you to explain it in a more environmental engineering way than I can possibly do.
Sure. Yeah, so Mike's got it pretty well right. The fine details are, we go along with your cleaning company. We prefer to have a deep cleaning done first, and then we take background samples. What the samples tell us is, well, how much biological material is left over. Once we have that data, then we go ahead and you have your cleaning people come in and do a disinfectant. So the idea is to do the deep clean for the entire areas, all the areas that are going to come into contact with your employees and the public. And then the disinfectant comes in afterwards, and we do testing of high touch areas, the areas that are most likely to come in contact with people. The testing that we do finds biological residue. Basically, it's areas where there's still potential for virus or bacterial infection. We don't identify what those things are, but we tell it it's there. The scale that we use basically is a scale to determine the cleanliness of an area similar to a hospital common area type cleanliness. We can go all the way down to an emergency room, but we don't think that's applicable for public spaces. But once we go through and do those testing areas, we get immediate results within 2 minutes after we do the swabs.
Yeah.
We can then direct your people to either if the test fails, we redirect them to get them to go back and clean the areas further until it does get to be a positive test. And then we provide a report that tells you where all the tests were taken, what the results were taken. And this provides it basically provides you a little risk management tool and a good corporate governance tool to be able to say, we've taken the best that we can to clean the surfaces, verify those surfaces independently with the best known test for this type of thing. And then we provide the ability to answer questions and provide additional data as necessary for whatever's needed.
And the reports to environmental agencies as well, right, John, Sam?
Yes, we'll provide those reports to anybody you would direct us to. If it's going to be the Wisconsin DNR or anybody else, Wisconsin EPA, whoever would be necessary to take those things as a part of our service as well. And Mike has asked us to go through and walk the building and talk about proper PPE or personal protective equipment, and then also to talk about areas where we would think that the people would come into some level of contact, walk it with your people, walk it with the cleaning people, whoever they would be, and then answer questions again.
So the cost for each building for the initial service is approximately $4,000 rounding up. The idea would be after we've been in for more fully open to the public, probably in mid to late August, that we would then test again to make sure that we have been meeting the disinfection standards with our regular custodial crew.
So what buildings are you, Mike, which buildings are you planning to do?
City Hall, library, and the senior center.
And
Note that Susan West has raised her hand.
go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I've got a question of, I think it's John, and I'm a microbiologist. So what exactly are you testing for?
I'm sorry. What was the question? Somebody called.
What exactly are you testing for? I know you're not looking for specific organisms, but explain in science terms what you're testing.
Yeah, so we're taking an ATP test, a trisos, an adenosine triphosphate.
Phosphate. Okay.
Yes, and it's a test that's going to take biological residue. So what we're trying.
Yeah, I understand now.
Okay.
So, Mike.
Yes, Mark.
You're talking about doing the City Hall, library, senior center.
Yes.
What about the other buildings, right? There's a EMS building, there's a police station, there's the tourism building, there's the public works garage, there's the golf, the center up there. I'm sure I'm missing one or two others.
Well, we have 9 buildings altogether, so you're right. What I have as a proposal is for our high traffic public buildings where there's a lot of concern with public access and distancing, physical distancing. When we do open up more fully, the Middleton Operations Center, the EMS, the police department, to a large extent, don't have a lot of those issues with many people coming through. The golf clubhouse could, once it is fully open. So, I think that's a fair question. The tourism visitor center does not have a lot of traffic either. So for the most part, those buildings don't have the kind of public access. It's mostly accessed by our own employees and vendors. The court, when the court is open, it certainly does have more traffic at the police department. And frankly, though, the police department also has a higher level of custodial service than the other buildings in the downtown area do.
Mayor Brewer has his hand raised as well.
Go ahead, Gurdeep.
Yeah, my question was to this consultant that what are the chemicals which you are using as disinfectant? Is it Clorox or something else in there?
Yeah, so we would work with the disinfecting and the deep cleaning company to make sure that whatever materials they were using were approved by the CDC and the EPA for the COVID cleaning services. This primarily is a response to provide a it's a standard of care that we believe that is going to be something that you guys are going to need to do, whether it's with us or anybody else. You have to do some standard of care to keep the public in what we would consider, clean conditions. So the EPA and the CDC give us guidance on what type of material or what type of cleansers or cleaners to use. Generally, they're isopropyl alcohol based for the disinfecting, and then there are also different types of cleaners, deep cleaners, bleach bases for the deep cleaning. But the disinfecting is primarily a flash off material similar to an isopropyl alcohol.
Okay.
By the way, I saw Rebecca Price had brought up the Hubbard Activity Center, and it's actually included within the square footage of the senior center.
So another question, Mike. This seems to be only the tail end of the dog here. What is the plan and what is the cost estimates for, the Head and Shoulders here, which is some company, I'm assuming it might be our own service provider of doing their deep dive cleaning?
I walked a guy from ServPro through our buildings on Friday, and he's working up a cost estimate for the deep cleaning for each of those 3 buildings. I don't have that at this time.
The item coming up on the agenda related to the contingency did have an allocation of $41,000, which would include the $21,000 for this item, as well as $20,000 for additional cleaning services. There's additional information that's going to be coming. Put an allocation in for that potential cost.
So in terms of the cleaning service, these are just estimates at this point. I don't have a quote for either, but ballparking $10,000 for each, the deep cleaning twice, and then for more custodial services throughout the summer and perhaps into the fall, as well as we open up more fully.
Okay.
And to your question, Mark, I wouldn't be opposed to adding more buildings. I was just trying to target those that are the highest incidence of public use. You can make a good argument that the police department is just as much public use as City Hall, but we have many more meetings at City Hall.
Yeah, except that approach doesn't take into consideration our employees, though, right? I mean, no, never mind.
Mark, if you would like to add other buildings, I'd be happy to do so.
No, but I think that there needs to be some type of protocol for deep cleaning for those other buildings, right? Whether it's a deep cleaning or some other way of doing some type of disinfecting. If you go to Woodman's, they have what appears to be some type of disinfecting machine. I'm sure it's probably something like hydrogen peroxide that they spray on every cash register and checkout line, like once or twice. I'm sure it's more than once a day. But I think it might be worthwhile for the city to investigate how it can clean those other buildings with our own staff, right? Or
Well, that's just it. When I asked Steve Wunsch about it, he said that the EMS takes pretty good care of their own building. So he wasn't concerned about having a deep disinfection because his staff, when they have downtime, they have the ability to do that. Police department, they have a higher level of custodial service and they pay for it. It's about twice as much annually as what the other buildings pay for custodial service. So Troy Hillenbrand also didn't think that this level of service would be needed for his building. So that leaves the golf clubhouse and the tourism, as well as the municipal operations center. And we could add the service to any one of those buildings if you wanted. I did cherry pick what I thought were the highest incidence of customer usage.
Yeah, just to jump in here real quick, if I may, Mark, you bring up some excellent points about the protocols. And as a part of our service, we would be reviewing the cleaning protocol and then working with your cleaning companies to make sure that they were stepping up their efforts to do everything that was necessary to meet the guidelines. So that's a part of our front end. We would be reviewing their scope of work and then altering it to meet what the criteria was to make sure that they did what was necessary.
And those protocols would be transferable to any building that we have in the city inventory, right?
Yes.
Well,
primarily it depends on the type of usage of the buildings, but yes, the similar protocols, but again, you get into different types of building and different types of usages. There are some variations.
The buildings downtown all have the coverall custodial service. The police department, I think, has master service or service master, and EMS cleans their own. And Municipal Operations Center, I believe, also cleans its own. If Sean's on the call, he could correct me if I'm wrong on that.
So Mike, my understanding is the TRC would clean it one time, do a deep clean, and then ongoing cleaning and maintenance would be maintained by our current providers for cleaning services. Is that right?
TRC would not do the cleaning. They would do the testing. So the cleaning would be done by another firm. The one I've chosen for a quote is ServPro, who has recently done some disinfecting work for our police and fire and ambulance vehicles. And they would provide a quote for their service, and I don't have that yet. But then for ongoing maintenance, we would have the custodial crew walk through with TRC to learn from the testing that they had done.
Got it. So that would be then ongoing, the cleaning crews would understand what to do in order to maintain the level of cleanliness post the initial deep clean.
Yes, and I believe TRC also has the ability to have somebody to explain in Spanish if that's necessary.
Yes, that's correct. And Luke, to your point, setting those protocols and making sure that those are followed are critical to the ongoing success of the program. So yes, that's a part of it. And what we typically find is that we're not saying that the cleaning companies aren't doing a good job. What we're saying is there are areas where they're doing a better job than others. And we make sure that they do the same throughout the entire facility to make sure that the cleanliness level is up to the standards that you guys are going to need for the safety of your public and your employees, to Mark's point.
Mike, do you know how the EMS is sanitizing their vehicles after each run?
No, I don't.
Are they doing that?
I believe so. Steve Wunsch is pretty serious about this stuff. We've talked, he's been a good resource for us at staff meetings about it.
Yeah, I've heard that Steve has indicated that they're doing a full disinfection of the back of the ambulance after every run. He would know the details about how, but I know that's a priority for them.
Could you share that with the council to let us know how it's being maintained? I think it might be, I read some stories where there are protocols for ambulances that might be transferable to some of the buildings on a larger scale.
I'll check with them and get some detail for you.
All right. Does anybody have any other discussion with this item? Okay, we have a motion and a second, or do we have a motion? I don't think, do we have a motion yet, Bill?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I'll make that motion.
Well, second.
All right, is there any other discussion?
Subject to city attorney approval, there are some provisions in the contract that I would not recommend.
That's not, I can modify pending attorney approval, city attorney approval.
Right.
Okay, second.
Okay. Any other comments? Going once, going twice. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Next item is, let's see what my agenda is. Capitol View Road Bridge repairs. So last week or two weeks ago, we approved the engineering services, right? Is that what that was from? The 50-some thousand or 50-some $100, and now Public Works would like us to pay what, 8 for the actual
16.
I thought our share was 8.
Let me clarify, Mark. This is Sean Stowski. The total estimate for option A construction costs is 32,000. So our
Okay.
share, the half, would be 16.
Okay. So that's it all in, it's going to be like 21, 22 grand for this?
That's the estimate, right, in that ballpark.
Okay. And do you have a source of funds for this?
We do not, no. So we identified for the engineering contract, the capital budget line item that we had set up for repairs from the last inspection round. But this is a somewhat bigger hit, and I'm not sure if that capital budget can absorb the extra 16. So I don't have a really good identified funding source for this. Nobody anticipated this coming up at budget time.
And what is the city's or the town's time frame for getting this done?
I think their preference would be to fix it soon. It's right now under a posted weight limit of 10 tons. So it's prohibiting them from driving significant farm equipment and school buses over that bridge. Of course, nobody's driving school buses right now, but I think their preference is to advance this.
Possibilities for funding. One would be using a portion of the excess capital carryover from 2019. There's about 85,000, and there has not been any action to allocate that to any particular projects at this point. Another option would be if we wanted to roll this into our 2020 borrowing, that amount can still be adjusted if desired. or looking to the 2021 budget.
Well, if we wanted to do that for 2020, we would have to amend the budget, right? Technically, since it's not in the original budget.
Yeah, if we were going to modify the borrowing, we would want to amend the budget to include that. For capital carryover, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is if we're within the original expenditure amounts and we're reallocating excess carryover, that I don't know if we need a formal budget amendment in that case. But I think clearly if we were amending the borrowing amount, we would want to amend the budget.
Right. So basically what would happen was so that if we used a carryover amount, right? So that amount would reduce the general fund transfer to the, actually, you actually may have done it differently. Can you walk me through the accounting for swapping out the budget from the capital carryover? Right. 'Cause at one point, the way that we did it was that there was a transfer from the general fund to the debt fund, and so the effect of the carryover would just be the reduction of the transfer. But you've done some things that are a little bit different now. So how does that work?
Yeah, so the source of the excess funds, it came from capital projects fund because we're doing the borrowing into the capital projects fund. And then we have funds that have been carried over for specific projects that have been approved by resolution. So those are funds within the capital projects fund, and they've been approved for continuation of projects. And then we have the excess fund that could be repurposed for a different capital project. So it wouldn't touch the general fund. It would just be allocating a portion of the fund balance in the capital projects fund for a different project or a different purpose. But at this point, that 85,000 hasn't been acted on. So it's essentially just available fund balance within the capital projects fund at this point.
And if there was so we'll play that out though, if there was a decision not to spend that, how does it get transferred back over to the general fund?
It really shouldn't be transferred to the general fund because it's proceeds from borrowing and it needs to be used for an eligible item. I would say if it's not allocated to another project, we could use it to reduce the borrowing amount either in 2020 or 2021's borrowing.
So we've actually hamstrung ourselves by doing it this way, right? Because previously, if it was a general fund transfer, we could control the amount that was transferred in. But now that it sits in the general in a debt fund, debt service fund, it has to kind of remain there.
Yeah, I think the issue with this is what is the source of the funds? And if it was general fund surplus that was allocated for capital projects, we'd have more flexibility to allocate that back to the general fund. But because the original source of funds was proceeds of borrowing, it needs to be used either for an eligible capital item or potentially transferred to the debt service fund and used to pay down debt. But we can't use it for general operating.
Okay.
And I want to throw in too, this is Sean again, sorry. I want to throw in too that this isn't committing the city to the $16,000 for construction. The project has not been bid. This really is looking ahead a little bit because the decision item tonight is to endorse pursuing repairs per alternate A. There are 4 sub options that the designer proposed, and we think the best bang for the buck is option A. It's the lowest cost with a reasonable life extension. So we're not here talking about a construction contract or even a bid. It's just an estimate and a decision for which option to pursue final design of, if that makes sense.
So what you'd like is you'd like a motion that would say that we approve of alternative A as a concept.
Yeah, and looking ahead, I think I was trying to plant the seed that it has a price tag on it, and how are we going to pay for that? So when the bid does come in, we're ready to act. But yes, thanks.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
I shall second it.
And well, so I guess conceptually, I would agree that this is the thing to do. I'm concerned about the timing, and I'm also concerned about identifying a source of funds.
Well, I think we want to see what the actual, I mean, this moves along so we can see what the actual price is going to be.
It doesn't really matter what the price is. There's no source of funds. I mean, that's the reality of it. There's no source of funds unless we say, you know, let's segregate some of the capital carryover with this.
Right.
There's no other source of funds.
Right.
So,
I understand that. It would be capital carryover.
yeah. So, Bill, how do you want to reword the motion so that includes a source of funds? Would you just like us to say maybe I can just offer a friendly amendment that says that the source of funds to be 2019 capital carryover?
Yeah,
That work for you?
Yeah, that would work for me. I think what we could do is identify that as the intent, and then when this comes back with specific prices, is we could have a resolution before you that would formally allocate that carryover for this purpose.
Is that acceptable to the mover and the seconder?
It's acceptable to me.
It is to me.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And motion carries. Next item is source of funding for engineering services agreement with Emons and Oliver Resources for floodplain scenario modeling proposals. Is there a motion for this?
I'll move approval.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
And so just to make sure everybody's on the same page, the staff recommendation is to use TID 3 for this, or TID 5 for
TID
this?
5.
TID 5
Yeah,
for
and
this.
this is Bill. I apologize. I was confused in putting together comments for this. There are two different items related to floodplain modeling. One is primarily related to Tribeca, and one is primarily related to Confluence Pond. I believe this item is related to primarily Confluence Pond, although I believe Sean and Gary are on and can address that to clarify that. If that would be Confluence Pond, TID 3 would be appropriate.
Right, and Gary knows more about this than I do. This is Sean again. But we think this might be most related to Confluence Pond. It's the 3 ponds, it's parts of South Fork, it's some various scenario modeling, various reaches of the creek and channels. So we don't know exactly what's going to be asked of the modeler to look into, but we think it's mostly intended to benefit Confluence Pond and that business park area. So TID 3 probably is more appropriate, most appropriate.
This is Gary. Sean summarized it fairly well. We're looking at a number of things beginning at Confluence Pond and moving upstream along South Fork plus Esser Pond, and then moving up North Fork all the way out into the town to try to understand what benefits there might be for future flood control by either expanding our existing facilities or constructing new ones. We don't know what the benefit's going to be yet. However, the assumption is the primary focus is going to be with Confluence Pond and abutting properties in mind. There could be other benefits to areas around South Pond and or Esser Pond. I would think Esser Pond more likely. But until we actually model something and then design something, we don't really have a target beneficiary of a specific project yet.
Gary, I thought that South Pond was part of it. It is at the south and those potentially 3 ponds and the then even some area, possibly from, where we had that land, which we bought from Pleasant Company, all of those. I think that seems appropriate here, so.
That's correct. South Pond is a key player in this analysis. And also the interaction between South Pond and Esser Pond, if we can adjust the stormwater barriers between the two to optimize the net gain in stormwater management.
Yep.
If I could offer too, this is Mike. Gary and I met with the Economic Development Administration of the federal government 3 months ago, and they practically begged us for large projects to use the Midwest disaster funding for our stormwater flooding protection. And we then embarked on this study, and I believe this eminence was already hired, but they're adding other work here so that we can identify those upstream areas by which we could use grant funding coupled with our own funding. They have about $50 million in Midwest disaster funding that has not yet been tapped. And we could put forward several projects once we have the study to determine how to do it. The EDA, though, will not pay for land acquisition. So if there are projects on land that we already own, that would be the quickest and most efficient way to get that kind of funding.
Could I throw an FYI in at this point? I was approached just today by a representative of the farmers group north of Middleton. They want to apply for a very competitive federal grant in order to help fund some controls across several properties in the North Fork region. And depending on the proposal, they're hopeful that the city might be a participant for fund sharing and a supportive team member to boost the likelihood of grant approval. So I don't know anything yet. I'm meeting with him Friday.
That's a pretty good news, Gary. That's great.
Okay. So at this point, this was, we need to amend the motion so that it identifies TID 3.
Okay,
So whoever made the motion. And
I made the motion, I think, yeah, for TID 3.
And the seconder is going to do that as well. Whoever seconded that.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is authorization to utilize 2020 contingency funds for costs related to COVID-19 pandemic response. Is there a motion for this?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on this? I just have one. Mike, how likely is it that FEMA and the state of Wisconsin are declare emergency for this?
Well, I believe we already have those emergency declarations.
Right.
So the question is whether there would be available funding to cover these costs, and that's harder to say.
Yeah, there is a declaration. We have a request for public assistance filed, which is the first step just to put them on official notice that we are interested in participating. We have not submitted any documentation yet. The scope from that, what is eligible is very limited. So for example, lost revenue is not something that can be covered. Additional costs for election administration cannot be covered. Cleaning and disinfection of facilities, including potentially polling locations, and equipment related to PPE should be eligible, but just given all of our frustrations with FEMA with the flooding, it's certainly not a guarantee. So we will pursue reimbursement, but it's not guaranteed.
Okay,
Could the cleaning that we just discussed earlier potentially be reimbursable? The 21,000?
Potentially.
Yes, yes, potentially.
And I will add that for the additional 25,000 that's being asked to be allocated for the election, that's an estimate that I'd asked Lori Burns to put together. It looks at our additional mailing costs from April, as well as doing estimates for additional mailing, postage, and supply costs for the August and November elections.
Okay,
what's the August election?
primary.
Primary for state offices.
Okay, any other discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is first quarter general fund financial report and update on the 2020 general fund budget projections.
I'll bring that up here. We no action on this item, just providing this as an update, both to give you the first quarter report, as well as to update the revenue projections from what we had provided about a month ago. Looking at the summary table on page 1 of the memo, our projections right now, and a lot of this is still unknown, but at this point in the year, we're projecting a revenues under budget of 817,000. On the expenditure side, we are also projecting that there'll be some net savings. The largest area in there would be for reduced costs related to Aquatic Center with a lower level of implementation, as well as recreation programs, some of the senior programs, as well as some personnel vacancies. The estimates for the Aquatic Center that are included in this projection are based on the information put together by the Public Lands Department, assuming a June 6th start at a reduced capacity, and they have an additional sheet with breakdown related to that. For purposes of this summary, I've excluded the budgeted use of fund balance of 500,000 and the emergency contingency of 500,000. At this point, we're making the assumption that on the expenditure side, that our additional costs for 2020 related to COVID-19 can be absorbed within existing budgets and the 100,000 general contingency, and that we don't need to move into that emergency contingency. From what we're seeing and what I'm hearing from other city governments around the state is that the biggest impact, at least in 2020, is on the reduction in revenues. There are certainly some additional expenditure costs, but the revenues are the main source that's driving that. I would add as well, and this is highlighted on the second page of the memo, as we talked about previously, as a municipal government, we are in better shape than state or county governments because our largest sources of general fund revenue, property tax and state aids, are stable, at least in the short run. We're not anticipating any reductions in state aids in 2020. Question is what's going to happen in 2021 and 2022 due to decreases in state revenues. And we don't know that answer yet. That's something that we'll want to be looking at and discussing at Committee of the Whole and Finance Committee meetings as we look to the future in future budgets. And then the table on page 2 of the memo for major revenue categories goes through, and we've identified 3 different scenarios: an optimistic, best case, and conservative scenario by each category of revenue. And the numbers on the summary table are based on the best estimate column. The largest revenue decrease continuing to be room tax, and then anticipating some reductions in licensing and permitting. Charges for services, which would include recreation and aquatic center, and fines and forfeitures is the largest areas.
Ugh.
Okay.
I should add too that with our general fund, we are also fortunate that we have strong reserves in the general fund. For our unassigned fund balance, we have a target range of 16.7 to 33%. We were able to fund that at approximately 500,000 over the midpoint of that target in 2019 because we had a strong year in 19. So even with these projections, you're projecting a net deficit of, I would say, 500 to 600,000 in 2020. We have reserves to be able to potentially absorb that and still stay close to the midpoint of our target range. Like I said, that my biggest concern at this point is what happens in 2021 and 2022, depending on if there's reductions in state aids and what we see in net new construction. So I think that in the short term, we're relatively stable, but we should be starting to plan for what can we do to reduce costs in 2021 and future years.
Hey, Bill, have we gotten any FEMA money from the storm yet?
Yeah, from the flooding, we have 451,000 that was received in 2019. We still have projects that are pending, including our larger projects for water control, which would include the Donna Drive Pond, the Park Street area repairs, Baskerville Harbor, and all of the public lands work. Those have not been obligated by FEMA yet, so we're hoping that we will get additional funding for those projects. But the 451 that we received is primarily for our emergency response, debris clearing, public safety, and some of the streets costs.
And what did we do with that?
That was received as revenue in the general fund, since the expenditures for those initial categories were paid out of the general fund emergency contingency. And that was part of what helped us to restore the fund balance in 19 that was used in 18. So in 18, the council had approved the use of the emergency contingency and the general contingency. Combined, it was about 644,000, I believe. And that money was spent in 18 and 19 on some of the initial response, debris clearing, and initial projects. And then when the FEMA money was received in 2019, that was recorded as a revenue and helped to be able to restore the fund balance that we utilized in 2018.
Okay. And you don't have any concept of if and when we'll get any additional money in the short run?
I think there's the potential that we could receive additional FEMA funds this year. In talking with our project manager, she had indicated that her goal was to have our remaining projects obligated by the end of the federal fiscal year, which I believe would be the end of September. But there's not a firm timeline at this point. We're continuing to respond and answer questions, and Public Works has just sent over some additional information this week in response to the latest questions. So we'll continue working through that and hopefully get some additional reimbursement for those projects.
Okay.
I would anticipate that those additional revenues we get would likely not be general fund revenues, since they would be tied to projects that are being funded by stormwater utility primarily, and to some extent borrowing that we've done for some of the public lands work.
Go ahead, burst my bubble. Okay, any other discussion on this item? All right, so moving along here. Under miscellaneous 1, Dane County resolution authorizing a taxation district to waive interest and penalties on property tax payment installments due on or after April 1st, 2020. You don't have any heartburn with this, do you, Bill?
I don't. There is a potential cost and lost interest income for us if our settlement date with the county is moved back. I estimated that might be as much as $5,000, maybe less, depending on where interest rates are at. But overall, our interest income looks like it's going to hit budget for this year, even if we were to go with this. So if that's something that there's interest in extending, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Okay, And is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any other discussion on this?
This is Larry. There's a couple of odd words in this. It's not enough to cause me to suggest we need to make a big deal over it. There's a couple of typos as well. And if the county will feel better if we submit it in exactly the form it came to us, that's fine. If they're comfortable with the minor changes, it would be nice to be able to make them.
And I should add too that we put this on as more of a conceptual item tonight with the anticipation that if there was support from the Finance Committee and Council, that we could draft a resolution for formal action at the next meeting.
Okay.
So we'll bring that back if it's so directed.
Okay, so do you want to change the motion to
Yeah.
conceptually approve this?
Conceptual approval.
All right. Is there any other discussion on this? Hearing none, all those in favor of conceptual approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is authorization to open the Aquatic Center to the public. So I know there's a lot of detail. Rebecca's done a lot of work on this. I think where we are is, does everybody agree, number one, that we should open the pools? And then the second thing is when. Rebecca at one point had said that she needed 3 weeks. So that suggests that June 6th is out of range. But maybe we should just hear from her as to, if we said yes, go ahead and go, what's the earliest that she can open?
I think that we've been doing some work to try to get to that June 6th date if we can at all possible. So it would require us to do a lot with the staff because we won't be able to do it until May 26th after that date. But I think every one of the staff is willing to go and do what they need to do if that means they get to open June 6th and start making some money.
Are the other area pools planning on following the same time frame?
I think each area pool is making their own decision. And
so we don't know what Goodman's doing or other ones, or
Goodman has made no official decision, and Sun Prairie and Monona are talking about July 1, and they are at meetings tonight as well.
Well, I don't know if I'm 100% comfortable with it, but I mean, I'm willing to entertain it.
So Rebecca, you need to tell us when you're going to open the pool. I mean, I'd love for you to say, yes, I can do it June 6th, but it sounds like it's possible that it might be June 13th.
We would like to open it June 6th. We are waiting on one part for the pool so that we can fill it. I had hoped if things went well that I could fill this weekend. I may not be able to fill this weekend if that part does not come in by Friday. And then we'd be back a week.
I think we also are still waiting for additional information from Dane County Public Health. My understanding is that under the current order that was issued today, maintenance is allowed but not opening. And unless you've heard, Rebecca, I don't know if we know what date they are going to allow opening yet.
As soon as we hit phase 1. So the earliest phase 1 will happen is May 26th. And we're right now in the Forward Dane piece, things are very positive that starting May 26th, we be in phase 1 and pools can open. Licensed pools can open May as soon as we hit phase 1.
What would be some of the reasons the other pools wouldn't open as soon as they could?
Financial.
Well, I can also add in pretty in-depth discussions. Monona's pool is very different than than our pool in terms, there's concerns there on social distancing and how many people they can have on the deck, because they're, and Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, but theirs is a less modern than ours. It isn't the full aquatic center. It's more of a lap pool with some leisure amenities. Is that correct?
Well, I think, the benefit of us is that we sit on parkland. So we have 2+ acres up there to social distance. A lot of people just have concrete and a fence surrounding their facility. So yes, Monona does not have this surface area like we do.
And Madison, in our discussions with them, there's a lot of reasons they're looking at. One of the things Madison has are 2 of their 3 splash pads are chlorinated. And
Okay.
they're looking at the beaches and splash pads as opening them and being, I think, more accessible to their population than by just opening Goodman. But again, they have not made any decision on Goodman, and I think that's yet to come.
Rebecca and Matt, a couple of questions on the financial stuff that you guys provided. So thanks very much for putting that together. And I noticed on the couple of scenarios that had the pool opening up, that there were expenditures related to concessions, that there wasn't any revenue that was being
Luke?
The expenses related to concessions, Luke, are the staff, and the staff are being repurposed to take care of the social distance monitoring. That staff, the concession staff, is paid under a different line item basically here. So
got it. Okay, that's helpful. And then did I read correctly that looks like there's gonna be an age or a level cutoff for swim lessons in order to maintain social distancing?
No, we have looked at the possibility of being able to offer all levels. It's just that under level 3 by the Red Cross, they're recommending they all be parent-child.
Got it. It's good to avoid contact. That makes sense. And then the last thing I thought I read was in part of the WEDC that said that actually splash pads can remain open, but is the plan still for us to keep ours closed?
Well, splash pads can remain open. There's some different guidance with respect to a splash pad. Keep in mind, ours is not a chlorinated splash pad, as Matt just also alluded to in Madison, that's a recirculating system. You also have to be able to provide a monitor to enforce the social distancing at the facility. And we don't have a hand washing restroom station there.
I'll add that in addition to the non-chlorinated nature of our splash pad, my other primary concern is having to hire a monitor to monitor that splash pad would be some form of special punishment that I wouldn't wish on anyone. I think it would be more problematic in trying to limit crowd size and social distancing in that setting. Madison is looking at their splash pads. They're both fenced in. The 2 that they're planning to open, they're both chlorinated. So they've got some advantages in that regard that I think make it more conducive to opening than our situation at Lakeview. And then you add in a third factor of the significant construction activity that's going on in the park. I don't think it's a viable alternative for us this summer, unfortunately.
I understand that, Matt. The only thing, it does serve a certain population of, the younger kids and from that area too, which is important to remember.
And forgive my ignorance, Matt and Rebecca, in terms of this, but so if we're looking at that scenario 4, which is open 6/6/20, and in comparison, I'm looking at, the middle one closed 2020. So that's a difference of roughly $136K in all total. Or no, I guess in terms of total subsidy would normally be a difference of like 35K. From where does that money come from? Does that come directly from the park's budget?
It's a general fund. Ultimately, it's a general fund deficit.
Got it. And Bill, do we have the general fund ability to absorb that?
I think that's already baked into those the numbers that we saw earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, I used the numbers public lands put together for the open 6620 in doing that projection. So it is showing that we would have a deficit in the general fund, but these numbers are included in that projection.
Got it.
I think
Rebecca,
important to note though, with the forward Dane guidelines that came out, hence the memo that we have sent you since, we should be able to have more people at the pool, which should increase the revenue.
I saw that. Do you anticipate them, Rebecca, even to get even looser than that, or do you think that's probably as loose as you're going to get in terms of the guidelines and rules?
Well, I think 25% capacity is pretty generous, actually, because that wasn't obviously that was not our original discussion when we were planning at 87.
that's
So
the most optimistic timeline too. I mean, there could be delays in going to the next phase, or they could have to back up, I would think, right? If they don't meet their benchmarks.
Yes. That's what they've included in the forward Dane materials, that
this is the most optimistic. Question for you on seasonal staff. If the pool didn't open, you have a line item for 11,500. Who are those? What is that for?
So the current pool manager is being paid, and so is the swimming lesson coordinator, because they're doing work to ready the pool for opening. Whether it opens or not, there still has been work that we have to do.
And this 11,000 covers what period of time that they're readying the pool?
Well, since we start interviewing and doing things like that, typically in April, that's taking into consideration their time, the time that they've helped with putting together. So it's a seasonal salary for the manager.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion yet?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion? So I'll make one. I'll move that we open the pool, and I will leave it to Rebecca's discretion as to the specific date. Hopefully she can publicize that at whatever time information becomes more concrete. I take it that was a second? Is that?
I'll second that.
Wrap up.
After they're done, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, is there any other discussion on that?
I just want to say I'm probably going to vote against this right now because I just feel like this is, I'm kind of a cautious person, and I feel like this is not, it's really an aggressive plan, in my opinion, to think that we're going to go through all three phases quickly, and I'm just not comfortable with it right now. I mean, we're not opening the playgrounds. I just feel that this is just doesn't set well with me right now. I don't know why.
I do want to remind you, though, that this is not this aggressive plan is being put forward then by the county. Yeah, based on CDC guidance, amongst other things, looking at how a pool could be a safer alternative than some of the other things that they're holding off on.
I understand that, but we all know that when kids go to the pool, that's not their main focus. They're not in the water 100% of the time, I just think that there's there's a lot of benchmarks that have to be hit yet, and I'm just not. The first time we have to do contact tracing is just doesn't, I just know I just feel it's gonna happen, and I just not ready for it yet. So I'm just gonna vote no for that reason.
I would be more comfortable with the July 1 open.
Well,
So maybe we could have some of the discussion at the city council meeting. So we have
well, just wait a minute, Gurdeep. We have a motion and a second. I understand some of the reluctance. Just as we continue to think about this, I'm not sure that there's any reason why we could not pull back on some of this stuff, right? If we said that, if we move to take action to open the pool as quickly as possible and things turned around, there's nothing that would prevent us from saying, wait a minute, we can't do this, right?
Absolutely. Or if we
Right.
don't need a benchmark, if we don't move
Right.
to phase two, we don't move to phase two, but we at least know that the phase one numbers are approximately 25%. And per that memo today, we talked about doing a stepped in approach anyway, because again, it's the reference of, do you turn the hot water on all the way or do you slowly turn the dial?
Right. And the other part, I think, I can see the merit in July 1st. But I got to tell you, my kids are going stir crazy being in the house.
I have a fear if you wait all the way till July 1st that you won't have any staff and we won't be opening.
Yeah. And the other thing, they'll be all in the Pheasant Branch Creek.
Or they'll be in the ponds, or they'll be in the lake.
Right.
I think we have some big concerns that way.
Yeah. So in any case, let's vote on this. And if it doesn't turn out perfect or with an approval, it can always go to council for more discussion.
So yeah, we have another kick at it there. Yeah.
Right. So there is a motion to open on June 6th or at a date that is discretionary possible soon after that. So we're going to leave it to Rebecca's discretion as to what the exact date will be based on her ability to open the pool. So there's a motion and a second, and so let's have a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
A roll call vote, please.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure, I'd love to have a roll call vote. Bill, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, go ahead.
Sullivan,
Aye.
Stard,
Aye.
Ramsey,
No.
Olson,
No,
Okay, so it's tied. No recommendation. So this is on the agenda for council. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So it'll just go there for
More discussion.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So finance is adjourned.
yeah. Okay. Do we have a new number for this one? I think we do.